I think what happened was I got home from Iraq in 2006 and was up for orders again. And at the time I was the only medical service corps, well, no other medical service corps officer in the Navy had more time in Iraq than I did. So the powers that be, and I was a medical logistics officer, so my job was to manage all of medical logistics for Al Anbar province. It's about 55,000 square miles of fun in the sun in the Wild Wild West out there, all the way to the Syrian border and back. And my bosses said, well, we want to take all that experience and bring you back into the fold here. So I got orders back to the National Capital Region.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Trustcast Show. And we're really happy to have with us Aaron Pease. Aaron, thanks for coming on the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Zane.
So Aaron enlisted in the Navy at age 18. He deployed to the Persian Gulf during the tanker wars. Then he went back to serve in Guantanamo Bay aboard an aircraft carrier that led Marines in combat in Iraq. And then before going to law school and becoming the outside counsel, general counsel that growth stage companies didn't know they needed. Boy, am I having a hard time with this today. He wrote a book called LLC and the Corporate Legal Survival Guide. Now's your cue to hold that up, Aaron, so people can see it. And one client he advised went from $5 million to $130 million in revenue in under 3 years, and we're going to talk about that. And he's also a partner in Renegade Capital Partners, involved in Renegade Capital Partners, and we can talk about that too. So your helicopter detachment on the USS Elrod flew more combat hours during tanker wars than any other unit, a record that still stands. What was that deployment like for an 18-year-old kid?
Life-changing, in a word. Yeah, like most deployments. I had grown up in a small town in northeastern Ohio, kind of along the Pennsylvania border, farthest away from the ocean you could possibly imagine. And my dad was a commercial pilot, or had a commercial pilot's license. He never worked for a big commercial outfit because he was looking for a job around the same time a lot of the guys were coming back from Vietnam with tons of combat flight hours. So that was a tough market for him. He ended up going into engineering and other types of real estate stuff. But at any rate, I wanted to fly. So I told the Navy recruiters that I wanted to fly or be part of air crew. I knew I wouldn't be a pilot as an enlisted guy, but so they said, sure, we'll set you up for that. And I got to boot camp in Great Lakes, and next thing you know, I was told that I couldn't fly. So I had to pick another job. And the time that I was under contract, it was called Aviation Anti-Submarine Warfare Operator. That's an aircrew position. And they said, you can either go home or pick another job. And I said, well, I'll pick this one, Aviation Anti-Submarine Warfare Technician, because obviously they're the same. Well, of course they're not. One is maintenance, aviation maintenance guy, and the other one is aircrew operational. So LAMPS Mark III, which is light anti-submarine warfare multi-purpose type helicopter, was designed to fly around, hunt down, kill Russian submarines. That was our job, anti-submarine warfare. So we were deployed out of the squadron in Jacksonville, Florida, Mayport technically, and to various ships along the eastern seaboard. My ship was a USS Elrod FFG 55 back during Reagan's 600 ship Navy, and we deployed on her overseas. Interesting story on that is that as we were on our way, the Stark, some people may remember, was hit by an Exocet missile from an Iraqi jet, and that tightened everyone's colon, to say the least, as we were in transit into the Persian Gulf, or on our way there around Saudi Arabia and into the Gulf of Arabian Gulf. And then by the time we got into theater there, we were engaged in lots of anti-mine. Obviously, there's no submarines in there to hunt down, which is an interesting story as well, because my bosses came to me and said, well, listen, we know that you're here to help us work on the avionics systems that find submarines in the helicopter, but we're not going to do that while we're here. So instead, we want you to get behind this M60 and, you know, we want you to be a collateral duty door gunner. And I just said, look, you guys sent me to school for a long time to learn how to do it. Now you want me to do what? And they said, yeah, that's what we want you to do. So, you know, you go where the needs of the Navy, so to speak. So, that
Military volunteer week always when I was in the Air Force, it was a military volunteer.
That's right. So Navy stands for never again volunteer yourself. That's what Navy stands for. And no, it was wonderful. I had a great group of guys, pilots and air crew, maintenance guys on the ship. Phenomenal. This is small Navy. We don't have frigates in the Navy anymore. But back in the day, Captain Bolin was our captain, and just an amazing officer and excellent sailor, and would trust him with our lives. And he definitely met the match and stood up to it. So it was amazing. Yeah. So our job was to kind of in the news now. Our job was to escort tankers that were reflagged American under Ronald Reagan, and escort them from the Straits of Hormuz all the way up to Kuwait and back. And that's what we did over and over and over. So we flew lots and lots and lots. We were doing phase maintenance. So the aviation community out there will understand what that is. We were doing phase maintenance at sea with a crew of 9 maintainers. And like I said, we flew 1,409 hours in, I don't know, a little over 4.5 months or so. And for that airframe, that record still stands. I think it's on Wikipedia, actually, if you look up HSL 44 Det 3, or if you look up USS Elrod FHE 55, I think there's a blurb about it in there still today.
So what about that specifically? You say it dramatically changed you. What about it, that experience really impacted your life?
I think it was well, first of all, if you work in naval aviation, you know this. There's a little bit of danger in it. It's a kind of a dangerous job. And what was exciting about it was that at the time that I was doing it, I deployed in 1987, returned in 1988. But during workups and on our way to getting ready to deploy, I'll remind everyone that was when Top Gun came out. So Top Gun came out in 1986. So as a young guy, the time out at the beach in Florida, there were lots of conversations with girls that went something like, what do you do? And the answer was something like, well, did you see Top Gun? And they say, yes. And then we'd say, well, that's what we do. So that worked out pretty well for us, even though it wasn't quite true.
It was close enough.
Let's just say we manipulated our environment for a favorable outcome. But life-changing in the sense that just coming in this is a small team, cohesion, small team, small unit, dynamics involved in that. The crew, the guys that we worked with were just excellent. And when you have a very high functioning organization like that, it's interesting. It's a lot like pro athletes. There's a focus, there's a dedication, there's a willingness to do anything and everything you can do to be a master at what your job is on the team. So everybody really put out, and you learn what it means to have that kind of responsibility at such a tremendous young age. So we cross-trained like crazy. So I was an avionics technician, but I was also a plane captain and tire and wheel qualified and hydraulics contaminated qualified and a CDQAR and all kinds of cross-training stuff that normally probably people don't do. But it was just one of those things that was afforded by the leadership that we had. A couple of our pilots, we had 6 of them. A couple of them were from Naval Academy. They were excellent officers. Our detachment officer in charge was a Mustang officer, had come up in the ranks, was now our boss. And his name was Richard L. Dick, and he went by Dick. So his name was Dick. And his call sign was Big. And he was he lived up to that call sign and was tremendous, just tremendous officer, good pilot, safe, pushed us to our limits, pushed the aircraft to the limits. That's our job. Um,
That's an interesting story. So you have a business degree from Florida State, a master's from VCU, and then you went to law school. At what point did you decide on, the law? When did that become your path?
I think I came back from my second tour in Iraq in 2006. And well, actually, I got out of the Navy in 1989, and I got called to the boss's office. When I say the boss, I mean the Commodore. And I was at the time working for him as a duty driver because I was a very low ranking guy. And when I sort of told my senior enlisted boss that I was going to get out of the Navy, I got called in front of the big boss and had to answer why I was doing that. And my Commodore was an excellent guy, Kevin Delaney. He's passed away since then. Admiral Delaney, later two-star admiral. At the time, he was Commodore, which means he was ranked as an '06, but carried the title as a '07. And Kevin Delaney was a helicopter attack pilot in Vietnam and just an incredible guy. And I had to go see him, and he said, Aaron, he goes, how come you're getting out of the Navy? I want to know, because if you need to go somewhere, then you tell me where you want to go and I'll send you. And it was just a tremendous
Yeah.
individual. And I told him, I said, well, sir, I said, I think I need to apply what I've learned in other places. And honestly, the truth is I really didn't think I'd live long enough to, come up in the ranks and fly around in helicopters. Is so dangerous. And a lot of respect for the guys that do it. And so he said, I said, but don't worry, sir, I'll be back and you'll see me. And when I come back, I'll be an officer and you'll see me. And at the time I was in E3, so that was saying something.
Yeah.
And so fast forward, I got out of the Navy in '89 and I went to college because I had a GI Bill. And I said, oh man, I'm going to use this and go to school. So I got lucky, got into Florida State, studied entrepreneurship there under Dr. John Kerr, who has since passed away as well, but another phenomenal individual, tremendous mentor. And we started with 30 students in that program, graduated 3. And I'm still to this day friends with the 3 of us, the other 2 guys. And got out of college and got a job like most kids hopefully do, and hated it. I had a terrible job. It was awful. I got transferred to Richmond, Virginia. It was just a terrible experience, working for a company out of New York. And this was when cell networks were all being built, and I was involved in some of that. And anyway, after a terrible experience, I said, well, I need to do something. And I had a girlfriend at the time who was a pharmacist. And she said, well, we have a pretty good master's in health administration program here at was then Medical College of Virginia, now VCU. So I went down there and I said, well, maybe I'll talk to those guys. And they made the mistake and let me in. So I went through that program. It was amazing. Super rigorous. It was at the time, it was the second ranked program in the country for health administration programs, a real CEO factory. Most of my classmates are big shots with major health systems across the country and are big wigs and stuff. And not me. I decided to go back in the Navy. So I went back in the Navy, this time as a commissioned officer. And that was in 1999. I was commissioned, and I had a great idea because I was told that, hey, you can come back in. We only owe 3 years and we'll make you an O2. And all your enlisted time counts for pay and all these other, wonderful things that they tell you. And I said, okay, 3 years, that's fine. No problem. I'll do it. So I did. And then 9/11 happened. And that 3 years turned into like 11. So
11.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
So I was a medical service corps officer coming out of my health administration program. And the first place they sent me was Jacksonville, Florida. It was back to Naval Hospital, Jacksonville, Florida. I didn't choose that. That's the way it went down. And then I was in the major facility there. Those military folks in that community understand that's a big hospital for the Navy anyway. And I was kind of going crazy there. And about, I don't know, 18 months, less than that, probably 14 months into that tour, 3 year orders. Had lunch with my boss and I said, look, I got to be in charge of something. I'm going nuts in here. And so he said, oh, okay, we'll hook you up there. And they sent me to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba to be the director for resources at the Naval Hospital there. Well, then 9/11 happened and the whole world changed in Gitmo. So a lot of the stories you see on television and weren't true. I can tell you that right now. But Gitmo,
Never, they never let the facts get in the way of a good news story.
truth is the first consequence, first casualty of war. So here we are in Guantanamo Bay, and the towers came down in New York. And at the time, I was in '03. I was a lieutenant, and called my detailer and said, "Look, it's time to do what we do." So I said, "I want to go operational. I'm ready to do that. Let's go." So I got orders to the USS John C. Stennis CVN 74 at the time was in North Island, California, which is right there in San Diego, out in Coronado, actually. So pretty rough duty living in Coronado. But it's always this but. But at the time, I think there were 13 carriers in the fleet at the time, and I got lucky enough to get on the one ship that was in a period of availability, which is a maintenance cycle for the carrier. So 12 ships were steaming to the Middle East to, go do God's work, and not me. I was stuck back on the Stennis, so I was pretty unhappy on Stennis, and called my detailer again and said, "Look, I don't know if you understood what I meant, but I kind of feel," and so that turned into, "Well, that we'll fix that, and we'll send you up the road 30 miles to Marine Corps Camp Pendleton." So they assigned me to the Marine Corps, which was a gift. I gave my heart to Jesus, but the Marines owned my nether parts. So I showed up at Camp Pendleton as the XO of Medical Logistics Company, which was part of First Supply Battalion, which was part of Combat Logistics Regiment 15, which is part of the First Marine Expeditionary Force. So I stepped on deck there in late '03 and was on a jet flying to Iraq in January of '04 for my first tour, and came home after that, and then went again in '06. Did the same job twice. So
then you got out, and then you went to law school.
I got out and went to law school because I think what happened was I got home from Iraq in 2006, and I was up for orders again. And at the time, I was the only medical service corps. Well, no other medical service corps officer in the Navy had more time in Iraq than I did. So the powers that be, and I was a medical logistics officer, so my job was to manage all of medical logistics for Al Anbar province. It's about 55,000 square miles of fun in the sun in the Wild Wild West out there, all the way to the Syrian border and back. And my bosses said, "Well, we want to take all that experience and bring you back into the fold here." So I got orders back to the National Capital Region in Washington area, up in Fort Detrick at Naval Medical Logistics Command. And my job there was to direct Code 4, which was the Operational Forces Support Directorate, which was great because I got a chance to work with Fleet Forces Command and the Marine Corps. And so if it floats or if it has a weapon system on it, it had a medical piece that went with it. And my job was to make sure that those guys had everything they needed when they were stepping outside the wire. So did some good work there. But at the end of the day in '08, I said, I need to move on. I got orders to go back to Iraq again. And I just, my body was broken at that point. And I just said, I can't go back. So I resigned my commission because I was non-deployable, and there's no reason to wear the uniform if you can't go over the hill. So I said, I'm done, and stepped away after 14 years of active duty service, all in. And I needed something big and audacious and scary and gnarly. And I wanted to let my crew know, my guys who I love dearly and were so amazing. They took real good care of me. And, you know, the truth of the matter is that when things go well, it's because you got a good crew. And when things go poorly, it's your fault. And that's officer 101. So I was lucky enough to say the former, not the latter, because my guys were good and did the right stuff the right way and took care of people. So I wanted to show them that even if even the old man still had some kick left in him, and you're not done, and you know, still chase it, go get it. So I needed something hairy and gnarly and big to occupy my brain. And so, yeah, as I say, I went to law school because I'm smart. So if I could dissuade anybody from doing it, I'm happy to do it. But it's one of the things, like, I'm really glad I did it. I'm glad I'm not doing it anymore. So now in your law school career, you're working. Tell me the name of your firm, and then tell me. So I know it's Highbridge Law Firm. You're the principal attorney, founding member. So tell me how that started. Yeah. So I started out on the other side of the street. I was plaintiff's counsel. I was a trial lawyer. And frankly, it was really a lot of respect for those guys that do it. I just feel like it really left a lot of my training ineffective. And I wanted to incorporate my training more deliberately. So long story short, I crossed the street and became outside general counsel to small businesses and mid-sized companies that really had some legal spend, but not enough to really justify putting an attorney on the payroll and bringing in-house counsel in. So there's a nice little gap there. So a lot of companies are in transition on their way to some other place. My goal is to help them get there safely.
So I said this to another guy, a corporate attorney guy, a couple of weeks ago, that the tendency with, well, I know our corporate attorney, he would always say, no, don't do that. And when you're working with a smaller company, then it's incumbent on you to be more flexible. How does that, how do you manage to do that? So you have to mitigate the risk between no and
yeah, no, and yes. That's really a good question, and I very much appreciate it. In fact, I won't speak ill of my brethren, but I'll just say that I think there's a lot of lawyers out there, and you're touching on it. I think there's a lot of lawyers out there that are on the sales prevention team. That's not really that as we say in Virginia, that dog won't hunt. Okay. The goal is, and the way I see it is, and the way I practice it is that my job isn't to say no. My job is to advise the principal of the risk and to suggest to the principal that we have mitigation standards that we'll employ as the principal moves forward in the decision set. So in other words, during movement, my job is to guard your flank. So I pay attention to what's happening, and we take steps to mitigate risk along the way. Look, there's nothing that's risk-free. Certainly as an entrepreneur, risk is part of the equation. To deny it is, in my view, counsel that probably falls short. My view is to suggest that we want to understand the risk clearly, so that we can take steps properly to mitigate it the best we're able to, understanding that nothing is guaranteed. It is, in a way, it's combat. So there is a way to control the chaos with a definitive objective in mind, with a clear path to that objective, while you're managing risk through the process. And I think that's a lot of lawyers. It's easier, frankly, for them to say no. Don't,
Yeah, it is easier.
I'm not going to, don't do that. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about the journey from with this one company from 5 million to 130 million in 3 years. That sounds more like a drug smuggling organization.
I can assure you that that was not the case. Thank you very much. No,
That's some very very impressive growth.
we were at the right time in the right place with the right team and the right stuff with the right clients. And that's it. It was a convergence of the stars aligned. It was a convergence of tons of variables coming into play at the same time. It was remarkable from an, I'll try to tell it from an internal perspective and from an external perspective. What was happening at the time was that external environmental changes were occurring so quickly that we were very reactive to the market. And my client was very, was, I would say, was very good at understanding the risks that were involved to get where the company was going. At the same time, accepted those risks. And I'll tell you, we didn't hit a bullseye every time. There were a handful of incidences that involved litigation. There were a handful of incidences that kept me busy. But the reality is that my client had a very progressive attitude about what was essentially the cost of doing business, and realized that we were doing things the right way, ethically, properly, with good corporate citizenry, et cetera. But at the same time, when you're seeing that kind of success, the marketplace it tends to react to it. And when that happens, lawyers get busy. And that's probably a fair way to summarize it. From an internal perspective, it was quite it was quite a ride. We had gone through a handful of serious and senior leadership changes during this period.
That's tough.
Yeah, our owners were always our owners, but one of the things that we had gone through during this period was a reconsolidation of the cap table. So we had a lot of outside investors that we did repurchasing of ownership interest in, and brought those shares back under the corporate umbrella. We had gone through.
How was that? I want to ask you about that. How did that exercise? Sometimes it's under less than ideal circumstances when that goes on, especially in a high growth company. People don't want to necessarily give up their. How did you handle that?
I think if anything, it was a testament to close coordination with the CFO. So the CFO and I worked very closely together. Her managing the sort of intake of those ownership interests, and me really making sure that we were papering the transactions correctly, and that those transactions were memorialized properly, and that there wasn't, going to be, at least again, risk mitigation in terms of any blowback. So it was I wouldn't say it was somewhat of a it's wrong to characterize this as monotonous or tedious. It was a long process, because there were quite a few investors that we had to work through, and some of them had been scattered over time to the four ends of the earth, and tracking them down and talking to them and talking to their representatives and getting all the dots and the T's and the I's dotted and the T's crossed was part of it. But in the end, we successfully, as I say, sometimes it's not a question of whether or not you'll arrive in the winner's circle. It's just a question of how bloody you'll be when you get there. So in this case, I would say it this way, Zane. I think in this example, I kind of reached up and pulled the tape down instead of busting through the tape chest first. I kind of reached up and pulled it down. But we got her done, and that was a big deal. But we had gone through changes in the presidency. The president of the company had been a little bit of rotating position. We had in my tenure there, we had 3 different presidents. That's in a relatively short amount of time. So that was disruptive for sure. But we managed through it, and somebody has to keep the ship steady, and that's part of my job as counsel too.
So you only take, or my research says you only take 12 to 15 cases at a time. Is that true? You kind of limit what you, and so how many attorneys are part of your firm, or how many?
Yeah. So what's nice is, and again, this has been sort of a process to build it to this, but one of the things I like to tell my clients is that when you're with me, essentially I'm sort of the family practice doctor. If permission to use an analogy, Zane?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm kind of the family practice doctor. I'm the guy that sees all the sniffles and the scraped knees and the lacerations and stuff like that. And sometimes if you come in and see me and you have, a bit of a, chest issue, or your heart's doing something we shouldn't, well, I'm not the guy that's going to cut you open and do heart surgery on you. That's not me. But what is me is, in my sphere, I have connections to all of those people. So if we have a case, for example, I sort of am an advocate for using employment attorneys, because the employment law in the United States, not to go down this too far, but just to say federal and state laws are very nuanced. So I'm a fan of using counsel that is extremely experienced in that. And because of my relationship with them, I sort of quarterback any kind of litigation that's happening, and whether or not, it depends on the circumstances, but sometimes I'll represent the client, so my client doesn't have to stop making widgets to go deal with lawyers, because nobody wants to do that, let's be honest.
Yep.
And sometimes the client, I actually serve on the litigation team. So right now I have a client in litigation in Maryland where I sit second seat on that litigation team. So it depends on the circumstances, but the point is that when you get me, you also get my Rolodex of attorneys that specialize in certain things. And then I manage that process, and it saves money in the long run for the client, because the conversation that person would have to have, that client would have to have with the employment lawyer, for example, is going to take twice as long because they're not attorneys. But I am, and very, familiar with what is happening there. I've done lots of stuff like that. So I kind of shorten and compress it and keep it clean and keep it sharp and keep the client's interest first and foremost. Often attorneys sometimes drift away from, not to any fault of their own. It just has to do with the difference between what they're doing and what the client's doing. And so having that bridge, Highbridge, having that bridge together makes a lot of sense. So
do you, before we run out of time, we're okay, but I just want to talk about Renegade Capital Partners.
Yeah.
So tell me about that, and where does that fit into this overall puzzle?
Yeah, Renegade Capital Partners is born from my days at Florida State College of Business Entrepreneurship program. Renegade, of course, is Chief Osceola's horse. For those Seminole fans out there might know that, but anyway,
I went to USF, so I don't know what you do
know. Excellent. So Renegade Capital Partners is really we're in the technology space where we're building essentially something called Bridge OS. And Bridge OS is, if you think of it, there's an operating system for your phone, right, that monitors the battery life and the calls and the text and all the stuff that happens on your phone. Bridge OS is really an operating system for small businesses. And we're developing AI-empowered technologies for that, encompassing essentially 4 functional areas. One is governance, also known as admin. The other one is finance. The other one is marketing, and then finally operations. So the idea there is that for someone who has a great idea, man, I want to start this business, but I just don't know how to run a business. I'm really good at, my example I use a lot is making cupcakes. I make a lot of cupcakes out of my garage. I'm really good at that. but at the same time, I don't really know anything about marketing or finance or operations or governance or any of that stuff. So I'm intimidated by that, or I don't know about it, or don't feel comfortable with it. So therefore, I'm not going to open my business. And the reality is that if you look at SBA statistics and that are widely available, you'll find out that roughly 60% of businesses fail within 10 years. That's just unacceptable. And the reason that they do fail is because, honestly, more often than not, it has to do with systems. It has to do with the lack of planning, the lack of development of systems, often governance and compliance systems that are always afterthoughts. So I kind of flipped the script on that and created Renegade Capital Partners as a vehicle to deliver technological solutions for companies that are really lacking the ability to stand up that architecture, that structure to build a company that can survive and grow.
What kind of companies are these companies that are looking to go public, or just general companies, mom and pop kind of companies? What kind of companies is the market for Renegade Capital Partners?
We try to look at that in kind of a layered way. So everything really from startup, literally the cupcake in the garage thing, all the way up to companies that are doing 150 to 300 million a year in revenue. So, in fact, some larger companies actually are targets as well, because a lot of times, you well know, a lot of times the business unit in itself has P&L authority. So as long as you have a P&L authority, you're really a good, potentially a good match for BridgeOS. So
explain to me. So this is, I can't go down too far of a rabbit hole because we'll run out of time, and I probably have 100 different questions now. Having been, quite a decades-long business background.
Sure.
Explain to me what the unique, what's the unique thing about Renegade that kind of differentiates it from the other products or solutions that might be out there right now?
So I think when you say Renegade, I think you mean BridgeOS.
Yeah, BridgeOS. Yeah, I do mean BridgeOS.
Yeah. So here's the big difference. The big difference is that right now there's a lot of concentration on AI ROI, right? There's been a lot of testing. There's been a lot of piloting. There's been a lot of investment. A lot of companies are moving, obviously, to take advantage, and rightly so, in my humble opinion. And what's happening is that you're seeing quite a bit of verticalization. So in other words, service providers are developing ways to deliver the product to the client. So if you're an accountant, for example, you don't want to, if you're a business, you don't want a tool that helps you close the books. You want it like a spreadsheet. You want a tool that says, here's your books, they're closed. This is the deliverable. It's literally handing you the deliverable. So when you think about it like that, you start really understanding that there's verticals here. So that's a vertical deliverable in the accounting space. There's other verticals that you can imagine that go right down the line. What BridgeOS is doing is it's the common thread of continuity that is horizontal across all of those verticals.
Okay, so we'd have to dig in really deep to get the full understanding of exactly how. So if somebody does want to dig in really deep, so here's a chance for a plug. And I have a whole bunch of other questions, but we're just going to run out of time. So if someone does want to really dig in deep and find out more about this, it sounds interesting, where would they go to find out more?
I think the best place to go right now is actually to highbridgelaw.com. And you can reach out and talk to me via highbridgelaw.com. And also you can find me on LinkedIn. Would welcome the conversation. So happy to discuss it. We're continuing efforts in building things. In fact, as a matter of fact, the governance question is so predominant, and it's so critical that AI is changing the way workflows work, right? It's also changing the way governance works. And there's a lot of discussion about that. In fact, I'll be speaking in Boston at the Compliance in the Age of AI conference, which is put on by Opal Group. Please check them out. And if you want to come see me in Boston, I'll be there in June. I just finished one in Atlanta regarding HR compliance, and then one before that in Alexandria, Virginia, discussing corporate governance and ethics in the age of AI. So it is a very hot topic right now.
Yeah.
And governance is a big deal. Most companies, and one of the reasons I wrote the book was because a lot of companies are failing because they're really not structuring that governance piece. And what I really mean by that is they're not baking into their structure operationalized rules, including legal, including governance and compliance, regulatory compliance, whatever it is that may affect you. So clearly that's going to change depending on what you do. If you're involved in healthcare and medicine, the rules are pretty dramatic.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, or any sort of highly regulated banking, any highly regulated industry. So, yeah.
Well, Aaron, thanks for coming on. I really enjoyed it. We may have to do this again.
I'd love that.
I appreciate it. It's really nice to meet you, and I'm sure our guests will enjoy the time with you too. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you have a suggestion for a guest for our show, email us at support@trustcastshow.com, and we'll get the conversation started.